Welcome to the Orange County Atheist TV show. My name is Bruce Gleason, and this is Stewart Bechman. Welcome, Stewart.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to email us at ocatheists@backyardskeptics.com, and we have a phone answering service at 714-998-8682.
We also support our friends at atheistunited.org, Orange County Atheists, and all the meetup groups on meetup.com.
There are many atheist and skeptic groups all around the country. Just Google atheist and your county or city, and you can find out how you can get in touch with other atheist groups in your area.
Now, this show is a continuation of what we've been talking about the history of atheism in the United States. And we're up to the 20th century now,
That's
1960s.
Right. We reviewed from the Constitution and how Thomas Paine was definitely an atheist, and he influenced some of the founding fathers, and of course they had their own ideas about religion.
We talked about Jefferson and Madison, the Treaty of Tripoli.
That's correct. And then we talked about a little bit of the 1950s, about communism and atheism.
How God We Trust, that's right.
And God We Trust issue, how communism was misunderstood as atheism. And now we're up to 1963, was a monumental year for atheists, Madeleine O'Hara.
Yes, yes.
Tell me a little bit about what Madeleine O'Hara did.
She got her claim to fame through a Supreme Court case, Murray versus Addington School District, where she had taken the school district to court to complain about the requirement that her son, Bill Murray, that had to participate in a school prayer every day. And she took it to the courts. The courts supported her. She got all the way to the Supreme Court, and her case, combined with two other cases, caused the amazing Supreme Court ruling that said prayer in school, organized prayer in school, because there's still, students still praying every test that comes up.
That's
but
right.
Organized, sponsored prayer is unconstitutional.
Now, this was a huge upset for Christians.
Absolutely.
A huge upset. I mean, there were nearly riots, and I understand that Madeleine was beaten in her home by the police, the local police.
Yes.
And she was charged with assault on the police officers.
That's right. That's right. This
correct?
happened in Maryland, and because of this ruling, and because of the hatred this engendered among the community, she was constantly bombarded with threats and vandalism, and she would, of course, like you or me as a citizen would do, like call your local police and say, "Come help me," and the police actually got involved. In one of the calls, she had come to her house and actually ended up beating her and then turning around and charging us, saying that she had attacked the police first. She had to flee the state.
She went to Hawaii, I understand?
That's right. She went to Hawaii to basically get away from all this, go to some place where, her name was not just akin to Satan, and reorganize her life. She eventually had to move. She moved back to Texas, Austin, Texas, at one point.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about how courageous this person was. Yes, she was hated by Christians, but she was doing something that our founding fathers wanted in the first place. Otherwise, the Supreme Court wouldn't have done anything to her. The Supreme Court agreed with her. Who are all these other Christian groups, no matter if it's a majority or not, to refuse the opinion of the Supreme Court, the exact law that everybody's abiding by now? To me, that seems like a whole contradiction of people who are against a person that the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of. Just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, Madeleine knew her law, she knew her constitutional history, and she knew that this was a right, an inalienable right promised to us by our founding fathers to have freedom of religion. And she was very much an atheist. She wanted to raise her family as an atheist. Didn't want to particularly promote it to anybody else at the time, but felt that she had a right to raise her family the way she wanted.
How much courage do you think this woman had, knowing what was going to happen to her? She knew she was going to be ostracized by society.
She had to know that.
Yeah.
Had to know. I mean, she'd already experienced some of that. To be an atheist in this country takes such courage, and you have to be so provocative, it seems like, to simply hold your ground, because there is such a hegemony of Christian bias in this country that if you don't buy into the Jesus mythology, that you're just a non-person. You don't have rights, you don't have values, you don't deserve to exist.
Well, a good example of that is a recent news article that came up in Freedom from Religion Foundation and other articles in, I think, several Skeptics magazines. There was a Texas coach, this is just several months ago, that have been going on his knee doing a prayer sponsored by the school. Of course, he's the coach.
He's the coach.
Now,
so
you can prayer in school
it's a
anytime
captured audience,
if you're
yeah.
a student, but you cannot be a teacher leading a prayer unless it's at a after-school prayer meeting or Bible study,
right,
or
on
something
your
like
own time,
on
outside.
their own time, correct, extracurricular activities. This person was kneeling in prayer 23 years. Just think of the students that were not Christians, even Jews. Or
how did they feel about
well,
that? What
that's
did
right.
they
Do
feel?
you think that they're not going to kneel with them and bow their heads? Of course they are. They want to be on the team. They are being coerced into
This is the role
praying
model.
for
This is the man who's trying to build them into the type of sports player that they want to be.
This coach was doing this knowing about Madeleine O'Hara's Supreme Court ruling, and of course it went to the local court system there, and they said, no, you cannot preach. So now he just bows his head. But of course everybody knows that if you look around, you're not bowing your head with them. That's also coercive to the students.
It is, and you have to wonder what kind of values are you teaching students
Well, you have to be very courageous to not
Yes.
bow your head in the first place.
Right.
And this is why we do not have prayer in public school, because not everybody believes in prayer.
Right.
Why do I want any teacher leading a prayer, or even the Pledge of Allegiance for that matter, if my child is in that classroom?
Well, now the response you're
And
going to
is-
get is you want to promote your atheism.
Well, I do not actually. I don't want them to promote their religion. I don't want
But by
either one.
denying God from the classroom, aren't you promoting your atheism?
That's a
What's
good
your
question.
response to that?
Well, I would say I am not promoting my atheism if I do not say under God. I am following my God-given, I shouldn't say that, boy, that was an oxymoron, my inalienable rights,
Inalienable rights, yeah.
that the Founding Fathers gave us to believe whatever we wanted to and to keep religion out of government, and government includes our schools.
And of course, you're not asking your child to scream, "There is no God, do not believe in a God." No one has, as far as I know, has ever said that in a classroom, which is what I would think that's promoting atheism.
Yeah.
We're simply asking for neutrality, and since you cannot name and cover every possible religion possible, it's just easiest not to mention that at all and leave
That's
it
a
to
good
your
response.
private home.
I am not espousing atheism because I'm not promoting, I'm not even saying atheism. How do you even know I'm an atheist? I just don't say under God.
Right.
What if it's a different God that I believe in? Or what if I'm from India
But of
and
course,
I
by
believe in
saying such things,
Krishna?
by being expected to participate in prayers, or in my opinion, even the Pledge of Allegiance, which was also religified in the McCarthy era, and to say under God, that kind of outs an atheist. And the whole issue of freedom from religion is to keep it private, that we're
Well,
not promoting it.
The pledge is especially important, and Michael Newdow in Oregon actually has a brief up to the court case going to the Supreme Court. They have not ruled on it yet.
Right.
And I actually read the entire brief, 29 pages, that Mr.
for you.
Eddie Tabash wrote, and it's fabulous, very well written, and spectacular for anybody who wants to know the ideas behind putting religion in government. It's different seeing it on our money, but when our children are listening to under God in the classroom, even though the majority are in there, the majority do not have the right to say under God in the classroom because it's oppressively coercing the minority. Is that accurate to say?
I'd say that is accurate.
Well, let's move on. Let's move on. Marilyn O'Hara
Back to Madeline.
Madeline O'Hara did a lot for atheism, but she also did a lot to turn off people to atheism.
Well, she had a reputation. She kind of glorified in the label of America's most hated woman. And if you understand the psychology of the whole thing, it's kind of what's it called? The something syndrome, when you kind of adopt the views of your